States of America declared war on the British Empire and launched a full-scale invasion of Canada. No one expected the poorly defended British colony to hold out against a much larger American foe, and yet it did. Canada's salvation came arguably in the form of one man, Tecumseh. He was fighting for his people, the indigenous tribes of North America. His alliance with the British was out of convenience alone, and his true goal was simple: to create a united native nation across the American frontier and retake the land that had been lost. Welcome to our video on the life of Tecumseh. Shout out to the Ridge Wallet for sponsoring this video. Members of our team have been using Ridge Wallets for more than a year now, and we recommend them to all of our viewers. They don't fold, don't bulge in your pocket, and are light, with a modern, sleek and industrial design. Ridge Wallets are a great Christmas gift for you and your loved ones. Ridge holds up to 12 cards and has an attached money clip for cash. It comes in 30 different colors and styles, including our favorites, carbon fiber and burnt titanium. For us, switching from the old wallets to Ridge was like going from an old chair to a super fancy gaming armchair. But don't take our word for it, Ridge has 40,000 5-star reviews. Each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty, and the Ridge team is so confident. Shawnees, Lenape, and the powerful Iroquois Confederacy were on the border of this expansion. Further inland, the French Empire claimed a vast swath of territory from Labrador to Louisiana. It was a sparsely populated land where native tribes exercised full autonomy and were more or less equal partners in the incredibly lucrative fur trade. The French tended not to impose on native territory, and their presence provided a buffer against British expansion. This all changed in 1754, as when the 7 Years' War erupted in North America, England and France found themselves in a war for dominance over the New World, and the natives were forced to pick sides. The 6 nations of the Iroquois declared for England, but nearly all the other local tribes fought alongside the French. The French were ultimately defeated and their territory annexed. The British now ventured inland, occupying formerly French forts along the Great Lakes and Ohio. It was well known that, unlike the French, the British did not come to trade furs, but to flatten and tame the land and displace the natives who hunted and gathered there. As settlers began to trickle westwards and British soldiers treated the locals with contempt, whispers of war began to spread amongst the tribes of the Old Northwest. In 1763, the Odawa chieftain Pontiac created an alliance of 14 tribes and proceeded to wage a bloody and vengeful war upon the British. His native confederacy raised hell, capturing 8 forts along the Great Lakes, killing over 2,000 settlers and 400 soldiers. Pontiac's fierce resistance forced the British to pull back and reaffirm an earlier treaty in which the 13 colonies promised not to settle land west of the Allegheny Mountains. Peace was made in 1766, and the tide of expansion had been stemmed for now, but war would soon come to native peoples once more. 2 years later, the man fated to lead them into battle entered the world. In March of 1768, Tecumseh was born to the Shawnee people in a village along the Ohio River. It is said that upon giving birth, his mother looked to the heavens and saw a comet blazing across the night sky. This is where the child got his name, Tecumseh, the shooting star. The Shawnee had long been a wandering people, beset by conflicts with other tribes. In centuries past, the Iroquois had pushed them eastward from their old territory. They had settled in many places before coming to their present spot along the Ohio River, but turmoil and warfare would carry over into Tecumseh's childhood. In the same year he was born, the Iroquois sold land in Kentucky and West Virginia to the British. These were plains the Shawnee depended on for hunting, but when they voiced their protests, they were ignored both by the British and the Iroquois. So, when continental settlers began pouring westward into their newly purchased territory, Shawnee warriors prepared to defend their lands. In 1774, a 6-year-old Tecumseh watched his father Pukesinwau and his eldest brother Chisikau partake in a ritual war dance before heading away to battle. They met their foe at Point Pleasant, a force of Virginia militiamen who the natives called the Big Knives on account of the sabres worn by the colonial officers. Outnumbered and outgunned, the native warriors were driven back. As a result, the Shawnee were forced to relinquish their hunting grounds, allowing the settlers to move westward with impunity. Tecumseh's father was mortally wounded in the battle. With his dying breath, he beseeched his firstborn son to preserve the dignity of his family line and one day lead his younger brothers into battle. The news of Pukesinwau's death devastated Tecumseh's mother, who was pregnant with the last of his children. It was no less hard upon the boy himself. Fatherless at 6 years old, his family was uprooted and forced to move west. That winter, his mother gave birth to triplets. Of the 2 that survived, one was named Lalawethika. Initially a useless layabout, the sickly boy would later have a profound impact on Tecumseh's life. A year later, the 13 colonies declared their independence from the British Empire, plunging the region into war and imposing a new threat upon native peoples. As the Revolutionary War raged between patriot and loyalist, many native bands now joined the fray on the side of the British Crown. Among them were the Shawnee, who sought to reclaim the lands lost to the now rebellious frontiersmen. This invoked the ire of the Americans, who responded wrathfully, sending soldiers into Shawnee lands. Before long, a large band of Kentucky militia were advancing upon Tecumseh's village. Still too young to fight, Tecumseh had fled alongside the women and children to nearby bluffs, while the warriors of the village tried to hold off the militia, to no avail. It was not the first time Tecumseh was forced to move, but this time he was there to see his village burn, witnessing with his own eyes the destruction caused by the Big Knives. Never again would Tecumseh sit idly by while his people's land was ravaged. In the years that followed, Tecumseh began training to become the warrior his father had wanted him to be. His eldest brother Chisikau took full responsibility for his younger brother's growth, obeying his dying father's last wish. Tecumseh was taught how to hunt, how to fight, and how to live as a Shawnee warrior should. When he entered adolescence, Chisikau blackened Tecumseh's face and sent him alone into the woods to find his guardian spirit. Tecumseh fasted and meditated, and his spirit came to him in a vision. He never revealed to anyone what form his ethereal guardian took. Tecumseh soon matured into a strong, intelligent young man. Allegedly, he once slew 16 bison with only a bow and a single quiver of arrows. He also drew no small amount of attention from the opposite sex. The women of the Shawnee were very fond of Tecumseh, but he did not indulge in their attention, often brushing off their advances. Tecumseh's first taste of battle came in 1786. The young warrior confronted a host of Big Knives alongside Chisikau and a host of Shawnee warriors at Mad River, Ohio. When the Americans fired a musket volley across the river, Tecumseh's nerve broke and he panicked and ran. He had failed his first test as a warrior. He was disgusted with himself and vowed to never show cowardice again. The following years saw Tecumseh come into his own as a capable warrior, albeit still in the shadow of his eldest brother. Continued conflict with the United States seemed inevitable. The young nation was burgeoning and hungry for expansion. Many tribes were resolved to do whatever was necessary to stop colonial encroachment onto their land. In 1785, this tension evolved into a prolonged frontier conflict known to the Americans as the Northwest Indian War. Rarely able to take on the US Army head-on, many native warbands resorted to hit-and-run tactics. By 1788, Tecumseh and Cheeseekau were involved in more than their fair share of skirmishes. Initially camped on the Ohio River, the two brothers and their band of warriors habitually raided the flatboats that traversed the busy thoroughfare. These boats carried food, provisions, and settlers, and their waylaying discouraged many from entering native land. During this turbulent period of his life, Tecumseh began to see the world in a new way. He was fighting alongside not just the Shawnee, but also Cherokees, Mingos, and Delawares. He began to see himself as a native first and a Shawnee second, and realized that his people would never be free of the yoke of colonialism unless they banded together as one. He began to detest the idea that any one tribe could sell land to the whites, whatever the consequences it brought upon other tribes. Tecumseh came to the revelation that land belonged to no one band, but to all native peoples. Thus, he began to dream of a united and independent nation, held together by a shared indigenous identity. In 1791, an alliance of tribes formed to push the Americans back east of the Ohio River. Led by the Little Turtle of the Miami and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee, they fell upon a force of 1,000 US soldiers camped at the Wabash River and massacred them. It is to this day the single greatest victory won alone by native peoples against the Americans. Tecumseh was not at the battle at the Wabash, but certainly took part in the increased back-and-forth raiding that followed in its wake. In September of 1792, Tecumseh and Cheeseekau joined a war party of Cherokees and Creeks and launched an assault upon Buchanan Station in Tennessee. From inside a stockaded blockhouse, 20 frontiersmen were able to hold off 300 native warriors. In this fateful battle, Cheeseekau was slain, shot dead by an American soldier through a porthole, while Tecumseh managed to retreat with his life. The loss of his older brother fell hard upon the young Shawnee, but Cheeseekau had accomplished what his dying father had beseeched he do all those years ago. Among many native groups, leadership was not determined through formal appointment, but by earning the respect of one's peers. In the years that followed Cheeseekau's death, Tecumseh had become a fighter of great renown and began to accumulate a small warband loyal to him. By 1794, the Northwest Indian War was nearing its climax. Tecumseh and his warriors joined forces with the Confederacy led by Little Turtle and Blue Jacket, forming a combined army of 1,300 men. Fighting alongside them was a British-led contingent of Canadian militias who had a vested interest in undermining American influence in the region. Together, they faced an army of 2,000 American soldiers on the bank of the Maumee River. In what would later be known as the Battle of Fallen Timbers, the natives were overwhelmed by American gunfire and attempted to retreat behind the walls of the British-held Fort Miami. The British would not let them in, not willing to risk all-out war with the US. Facing a massacre, the natives were forced to scatter. The betrayal Tecumseh suffered at the hands of the British was one he would not forget. The engagement at the Fallen Timbers ended the 10-year frontier war, and the United States finally managed to impose their sovereignty over the Old Northwest. Native leaders were compelled to sign the Treaty of Greenville, a document that forced them to recognize large chunks of Ohio and the Great Lakes as American soil. Tecumseh was disgusted by this capitulation and stubbornly refused to sign the treaty. Instead, he retreated with his followers to Buck Creek, where he founded a village. For the next 10 years, Tecumseh bided his time, waiting for the opportunity in which he could make his dream a reality, a dream of a united, self-sufficient native nation. That opportunity would arrive in 1805, when Tecumseh's laggard of a younger brother received a vision from the Great Spirit. The idler, known as Lalawethika, would transform into Tenskwatawa, the Great Prophet, and lead a religious revival that would bring together tribes from all corners of the American frontier. By the turn of the 19th century, it was clear that the Americans' hunger for territory had not been sated. The Louisiana Purchase, which saw a massive stretch of land sold by the French to the United States, all but confirmed that further ingress into native inhabited lands was inevitable. In the aftermath of their victory in the Northwest Indian War, over 600,000 American pioneers would settle in the newly established states of Kentucky and Ohio, as well as the territory of Indiana, land once dominated by native tribes. Disunited and outnumbered, the natives of the frontier were direly outmatched. Despite this, Tecumseh never gave up his grand ambitions to retake native territories. As fate would have it, it would actually be his brother who would spark the movement that would snowball into the creation of his great confederacy. This man was Lalawethika, meaning he who makes a loud noise. He had always been the black sheep of the family, having never become a great warrior like his brothers. A freak accident had taken out his eye when he was young, and he spent the majority of his youth as a perpetually drunk good-for-nothing. In the year 1805, everything changed. One day, Lalawethika was smoking in his wigwam when suddenly his body seized up and he fell into a trance. His stupor was so deep that those around him thought he had died, yet soon he awoke as a changed man. Lalawethika told everyone that he had received a vision from the Great Spirit, in which he had seen his people led onto a path of doom, and was now convinced that the Great Spirit had sent him on a mission to purify native culture for their salvation. He took on a new name, Tenskwatawa, the Open Door. In time, he became known to his people as the Prophet. The Prophet soon began spreading his teachings amongst the Shawnee. He preached that his people were the Great Spirit's original creations. In contrast, the white people were children of the evil spirit that grew from the scum of the great waters. As such, natives bore an innate responsibility to keep their way of life pure of colonial influence. To this endeavor, he denounced intermarriage between natives and whites, which had become commonplace in the last few decades. He spoke out against alcoholism and forbade the evils of drink. He renounced European clothing and other such innovations brought to his lands since first contact, mandating his followers wear the traditional garments of their people. In the winter of 1805, a familiar calamity struck the Old Northwest. Native communities were once more afflicted by an outbreak of smallpox, leaving many communities crippled or entirely depopulated. Disease had sadly become old news to the natives by this point, who often coped by blaming their misfortune on witches, who supposedly were sinister herbalists capable of brewing malicious potions and spreading illness. Thus, in the spring of 1806, the Prophet became a major ringleader in a witch hunt that spread across the Old Northwest, a hunt he used to further spread the influence of his religious movement. Tenskwatawa hounded down all those who denounced him, and all who embraced the ways of the white man. Under his watch, Christian natives and chieftains friendly to the Americans were captured, tortured, and killed, all in the name of rooting allegedly evil witches out of native communities. The Prophet soon had a growing following, not just among the Shawnee, but many neighboring tribes as well. The growing unrest in the native Northwest began to make